my speech, I'm just going to tell a story about myself and how I got here. Handy. My name is Atticus Mercredi. I'm Mr. Wasis Nahigawak and Kaitala Dennis Aline. My mother's name was Glenda Faye Ledoux. She was Cree from the Mississaugas First Nation, which is north of Saskatoon. My father's name is Leon Mercredi, and he is Dene from the Athabasca, Chippewa, and Dene First Nation in northern Alberta. I currently live here on Nanaimo territory, and I've lived here for about 2.5 years. I'm very grateful to be living on these lands and waters, and I pay my respect to the Nanaimo people and community. I'm 32 years old now, and I've experienced a lot. I have recently begun my journey dealing with the aftermath of intergenerational trauma from the residential school system and direct trauma from the foster care system, and racism living as an indigenous person in so-called Canada. My mother was a residential school survivor in Saskatchewan and a victim of the 60s scoop. She attended the Duck Lake Residential School in northern Saskatchewan. My mom, she's in the center there, she had 12 children, all of whom were taken from her by social services. She tried pretty hard to get us back, but she was never able to navigate the colonial and bureaucratic expectations that the social agencies placed on her. She also struggled immensely with her addiction to alcohol, which likely stemmed from colonial trauma. My mom gave birth to me in 1991, and I was taken from her at the Royal University Hospital in Saskatoon. And I was placed with my aunt. And I spent the first year of my life there at my aunt's place. I was adopted at the age of 1 after spending first year. I don't know my aunt, but at this stage in my life, I realized it probably wouldn't be too hard to find her. I recently requested my documents from the government of Saskatchewan Social Services so I can get more information about that point of my life. When I was 1, I was placed in the foster care system, and I was adopted by a white settler family in Lanigan, Saskatchewan. I often explain to people that I consider my foster family to be my real family. My foster parents are the only real parental figures that I have had in my life. My foster parents brought me to family gatherings with my biological family and with my mom when I was young. But I can't remember any of these meetings, and I have never really felt too close to any of my siblings. My biological mother died when I was 9 from complications with stomach cancer. I met my biological father, Leon Mercredi, for the first time last spring, and he told me that he attended residential school for 10 years and that it was evil. Those are my foster parents, Len and Judy Priest. They had 2 kids of their own and fostered 4 indigenous children, including one of my biological brothers, Dylan Britton, and my 2 adopted sisters, Floraline and Jade Bear. And that's my dad, Leon, and that's us at the end of the weekend where we first met. Throughout my childhood, I struggled with ADHD, FASD, and learning disabilities in school. After graduating and moving out of my parents' home, I became addicted to alcohol and hard drugs. I didn't feel worthy of love and repressed my emotions with substance use. My addictions were so severe that I struggle now with memory issues. And also during this time, I ended up in the hospital on multiple occasions because of overdoses and suicide attempts. In 2019, I decided to take control of my life after 9 years of heavy drug and alcohol use. I became sober on January 17th of 2019. I remember having a conversation with a friend and just telling him, tonight's the last night that I'm drinking, I can't keep doing this. And that was pretty much it for me. The party was over, and I had to get it together or I was going to die. My friends used to have serious conversations with me about my addictions, but I never listened to them for years and years. At first I went to AA and NA meetings, but they didn't really do much for me. Being in that environment was uncomfortable. After a few meetings, I decided I had to do it myself. I didn't have much knowledge about other recovery services at the time, and I couldn't afford therapy. However, I was sick of being alone and ruining my close relationships because of my addictions. I began to see myself as someone who deserved to live and who was worthy of healthy love and care. Before I knew it, I was 10 days sober, then 2 weeks, then a month, then 6 months, then a year. Now I'm happy to say that I'm almost 6 years sober and I feel a lot better. I still struggle with my self-esteem, but I take pride in myself and my accomplishments since becoming sober. I enjoy clarity and feeling healthy in my body. My goals feel a lot easier to achieve and accomplish now that I'm not overwhelmed by drugs and alcohol or the toxic environments that they can create. Along with becoming sober, creating art has helped me on my healing journey. I used to draw a lot as a child, but stopped when I was in the throes of my addictions. In 2019, I started using art again as a means of creating characters that I could relate to, and who could portray my messages in relation to my views on the world and my struggles at the time. One of the first things I remember drawing was an image of a creature standing knee-deep in a swamp, wearing a fringe jacket, playing a banjo, with the word bubble that said, "I'm just a lone swamp boy." This isn't that one, it's kind of like a reoccurring character in my art. As time went on, I started drawing more and more creatures or beings that could portray my inner dialogues, with sayings such as, "I have so many regrets," or "I don't know where the fuck I'm going." I was slowly beginning to find my lust for life. In a few years of being sober, I had established myself as an artist under the name Swamp Boy. To me, the swamp that I'm alone in is the void of wandering life stuck in between two worlds. After growing up in small town Saskatchewan with parents that were able to provide me with a childhood with less obstacles than many other Indigenous kids in town, I found myself subjected to judgments from other Indigenous people throughout life. They would hear my voice or notice that I don't speak in the same way as them. Sometimes in the past, other Indigenous men would even threaten me. And in 2019, I was also physically attacked by an Indigenous man, and that traumatized me quite a bit. I've also never felt entirely comfortable in spaces where the majority of people are settlers, which is most spaces. I remain in an in-between space, constantly experiencing a liminal reality. I also often see Indigenous relatives in urban spaces who appear to be visibly struggling, and I think about certain people from my past, and I have them in the back of my mind wondering if they're going to be okay. To witness the plight of my own kind has changed me over the years. But creating art has helped me find a place for myself in this world. Between 2019 and 2021, I increased my artistic output and focused on improving my artistic skills in watercolor, acrylic painting, ink, photography, and lino cutting. When I'm creating and in my creative process, I think about all the healing that I've done and how much there is left to do. In these moments, I often reflect on my Indigenous family's history and what has happened. It gives me moments to think about what steps I need to take to fully understand the gravity of my intergenerational trauma and the pain that lives inside of me. Art helps me to move through my pain. In the last few years, I've taken my artistic endeavors more seriously, and I've had solo art shows in Nanaimo at Nightmare Oasis and the View Gallery at BIU for my late mother. That's the show that I did for my mom. I've also started playing music regularly and recently started a band called Prophecy Club. This band has become an outlet for me to expel some of my anger, or what I like to call my Indigenous rage. I feel very lucky to have supportive band members and friends with me. One of our songs is a tribute to the late Colton Bushi and Tina Fontaine, who were Indigenous youth murdered by white men. Prophecy Club recorded an EP entitled Mushum this earlier on in the spring, and it's not out yet, but it will be released soon. Some of the other songs on the album speak to the colonial violence and the suffering of Palestinian people, climate change, and Indigenous resilience and joy. To end my talk, I would like to invite some of my band members here to join me, Dave, Mark, and Atana, in order to showcase the song I wrote for this event. Missing is our drummer, Gabe, but drums in this place would have been probably too loud.